I want to make another scarf in a lacy design, and for this pattern I will use a combination of puff stitches, single crochets and chains. I will use Snuggly Wuggly yarn by Loops and Threads and a hook size G 4.25 millimeters. This stitch is a multiple of 6 plus 2, and for my scarf I will start with chain 38. One, two, three. So here I have 38 chains and I'm ready to start my first row. Into the 6th chain from the hook I need to make my first puff stitch. We never count the chain on the hook, we always start counting from the next chain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here into this chain I need to make a puff stitch, and here is how I do it. Yarn over and I insert the hook and draw up a loop. Then again yarn over and into the same chain I insert the hook and draw up a loop. Then again yarn over and into the same chain I insert the hook and draw up a loop. And I did that a total of 3 times, and now I have 7 loops on the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then yarn over and I draw yarn through all 7 loops, and this is my first puff stitch. Then I make 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and into the same chain where the first puff stitch was made I make another puff stitch. 1, 2, 3. Then again I make 3 more chains. 1, 2, 3, and I make another puff stitch into the same chain. 1, 2, 3. Next I need to skip 5 chains and make another 3 puff stitches into the next chain. I want you to note here that when you make 3 puff stitches into the same chain, the next chain becomes small and difficult to see, so make sure you are skipping 5 chains and not 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and into the next chain again I make a puff stitch. 1, 2, 3. Then 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and another puff stitch into the same chain. 1, 2, 3. Then again 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and 1 more puff stitch into the same chain. 1, 2, 3. Then again I skip 5 chains and make 3 more puff stitches into the next chain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and into the next chain I make a puff stitch. 1, 2, 3. Then 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and a second puff stitch into the same chain. 1, 2, 3. Again 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and another puff stitch. 1, 2, 3. And I continue crocheting this way until the end of this row. So here I am at the end of the first row. This is what it looks like, and here I have 3 chains left. So I skip the next 2 chains, 1, 2, and I make a double crochet into the last chain. And this is my first row. I'm ready to start my next row, so I do 6 chains and turn, and then I skip my next puff stitch, and in top of the next puff stitch, the second one, I make a single crochet. Then I make 5 chains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I skip the next 2 puff stitches, and in top of the next puff stitch, this is the second puff stitch of the second group of puff stitches, I make a single crochet. Then again I make 5 chains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a single crochet in top of the second puff stitch of the next group of puff stitches. Again 5 chains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a single crochet in top of the second or the middle one puff stitch of the next group of puff stitches. And I continue this way until the end of this row. So here I am at the end of row 2. I just made a single crochet in top of the middle puff stitch of the last group of puff stitches, and now I make 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and I need to make a double crochet in top of the turning chain right here. So make sure it's not the chain between the puff stitches, it's the last chain, the top chain of the turning chain. And this is what my second row looks like. I'm ready to start my next row. I started with chain 3 turn, and now into the next single crochet I'm going to make puff stitches again. 1, 2, 3. My first puff stitch, then 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and another puff stitch, 1, 2, 3, again 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and one more puff stitch, 1, 2, 3. And now I make puff stitches into the next single crochet. 1, 2, 3, then 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, again a puff stitch, 1, 2, 3, 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and another puff stitch, 1, 2, 3. And I continue this way until the end of this row. And here I am at the end of this row, and I will finish it with a double crochet into the third chain of the turning chain 6. 1, 2, 3. So I count from the bottom, and into this chain I make a double crochet. And now I simply need to repeat the rows 2, 3 for the pattern. So here I repeated rows 2 and 3 several times, and this is what my pattern looks like. It's very light and airy, and I think it will work nicely for a baby blanket too. And now I used up the entire skein of yarn. This is all I have left, just enough for one more row to finish my scarf. I start my last row the same as row 3 with chain 3 turn, and now I'm going to make my first puff stitch. But now instead of making 3 chains, I will make only 1. Then my second puff stitch. Then again 1 chain and my third puff stitch. Then into the next single crochet I make a puff stitch again. And again I only make 1 chain and next puff stitch. One chain and next puff stitch. And I continue this way until the end of this row. And I finish this row as before with a double crochet into the third chain of the turning chain 6. And the reason I made only 1 chain in between my puff stitches is because I want my last row to be straight, so it matches my first row, which is straight. And making 3 chains would give me a scalloped edge, but I want it to be straight. All I have to do now is to fasten off and hide my yarn tails on both ends of the scarf.